Welcome back, tribe. Today's episode might hit a little bit close to home for a bunch of people, myself including. It's talking about our relationships with our fathers and some of the trauma that we unknowingly inherit from being raised by them. Because DNA isn't the only thing my old man passed down to me, and it's probably the same for you as well. There's an invisible inheritance that runs deeper than blood, patterns, beliefs, and fears that weren't yours to begin with. You're carrying around programming installed by a man who was running software from the 1960s, trying to navigate a world that doesn't even use that operating system anymore. Think about it. Every time you catch yourself saying something and suddenly realize, fuck, that's exactly what my dad would say. Those moments when you're dealing with your kid and you feel that familiar surge of anger rising up, that same way it did in him, the way you shut down during arguments or work yourself to exhaustion or struggle to say, I love you. Those aren't random quirks. Those are echoes of battles fought before you were born. Most guys don't realize that they're living out their father's unfinished business. Maybe he's never learned to handle emotion, so he taught you to bury it. Maybe he grew up poor, so he programmed you to chase money at all costs. Maybe he was beaten down by life, so he trained you to expect the worst. Or maybe he was absent, and that absence became a presence all on its own, teaching you lessons about trust and abandonment that you're still trying to unlearn. Some of you had great dads, some of you had monsters, and most of you had something in between. A human being doing his best with his own damaged code, trying to raise a son in a world he didn't fully understand. But whether he was your hero or your warning sign, his influence runs through your life like a hidden script. You see it in how you handle stress, how you handle love, and how you parent, how you process pain. Those aren't just habits, they're inherited trauma responses. When your dad told you to man up, he wasn't just being tough. He was passing down the same message that was beaten into him. And when he pushed you towards success at all costs, he was trying to protect you from the poverty that haunted him. This isn't about blame. Your old man was fighting his own demons while trying to raise you. He was working with whatever tools his father gave him, just like his father before him. It's a chain that goes back generations, men raising boys into men, each one passing down a mix of wisdom and wounds. And the tricky part is, some of what he gave you was gold. That work ethic that keeps you going when others quit, the sense of responsibility that makes a reliable man, the drive to protect and provide for your own. Not everything inherited needs to be discarded. The challenge is sorting through the wreckage to find the treasures. But some of what you inherited is poison. And that rage that explodes out of nowhere, the emotional walls that keep everyone at arm's length, the need to control everything because vulnerability feels like weakness. That voice in your head that sounds suspiciously like him, telling you you're never quite good enough. Breaking those patterns isn't as simple as deciding to be different. That programming runs deep, man. It's in your muscle memory, your gut reactions, your automatic responses. It shows up in ways you don't even recognize until you're already knee-deep in the same old shit. Watch yourself during stress. Notice how your body tenses up the same way his did, how your voice gets the same edge, how you reach for the same coping mechanisms. Maybe it's silence, maybe it's anger, maybe it's drowning it in work or whiskey. Those reactions feel natural because they're all you've known. But they're learned behaviors passed down like family heirlooms, and nobody asks for them. Some of you are fighting to be exactly like your father. Others are fighting just as hard to be nothing like him. Both are traps, because either way, he's still controlling the narrative. Either way, you're just letting his history dictate yours. True freedom isn't in copying or rejecting. It's choosing consciously. The real mindfuck starts when you have kids of your own. Suddenly, you're standing where he stood, dealing with the same challenges he faced. You catch yourself mid-sentence, hearing his words coming out of your mouth. You feel the same frustrations, the same pressure, the same temptations to take the easy way out, to parent from anger, from fear, unprocessed pain. Or maybe you don't have kids yet, but you see his influence in your relationships, in the way you handle conflict, what you expect from partners, and what feels normal or comfortable, even when that normal is quietly destroying your chances at real connection. The workplace is another mirror. Your relationship with authority, that's shaped by him too. Your attitude towards money, those aren't just your views. They're inherited beliefs about security, worth, and what it means to be successful. Some of you are still chasing a definition of success that belongs to a different generation, a different economy, just a different world entirely. Your father's generation had their own rules of engagement. Showing emotion was weakness to them. Asking for help was certain failure. Mental health wasn't even in the conversation. They were taught to provide, protect, and keep their shit together at all costs. Many of them did the best they could with what they knew, but what they knew was limited by their time, their culture, their own wounds. Modern life demands different skills, different awareness, different emotional capacity. You're navigating challenges your old man never had to face. Social media wasn't even destroying his self-worth. Dating apps weren't making him question his value. And remote work wasn't blurring all his boundaries. The rulebook he gave you was written for a game that doesn't exist anymore. Breaking these patterns starts with awareness. You got to become a detective in your own life, studying your reactions like they belong to someone else. Pay attention to those moments that trigger an outsized response. When small shit makes you blow up, when certain words make you shut down, when specific situations send you in autopilot behaviors you're not proud of. Those triggers, they're like warning lights on your emotional dashboard. Each one points to something deeper, some unresolved shit, some inherited fear, some ancient hurt that's been passed down. Maybe it's how you freeze up when someone raises their voice because that's what happened before dad exploded. Maybe it's how you hide your achievements because showing pride always brought criticism. A lot of guys walk around thinking they've dealt with their father issues just because they can acknowledge them. They can point to their dad's flaws, list all the ways that they're different, talk about how they'll never be like that. But awareness without action is just sophisticated suffering. You're still living in reaction to him. You're just conscious of it now. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between then and now. When something triggers those old patterns, your body responds like it's still living in your childhood home. Your heart rate spikes the same way, your muscles tense the same way, and your brain fires up those same protective responses that kept you safe back then, but might be screwing you over now. This is where most men get stuck. They intellectually understand their patterns, but can't seem to change them. They promise themselves they'll handle things differently, then find themselves right back in those same reactions. Because you can't logic your way out of emotional programming. You can't just think your way past trauma responses. This shit lives in your body, not just your brain. And some of you are carrying generations of unprocessed trauma. Your dad got it from his dad who got it from his dad, a chain of men who never had the tools or permission to heal. Each one adding their own layer of pain, their own coping mechanisms, and their own survival strategies. And now you're standing at a crossroads, deciding if you're going to be the one that can break the chain. And you know the hardest part in this is? You might have to grieve the father you needed but never had. Accept that guidance, support, or love you wanted might never come from him. That's a special kind of pain. Mourning someone who's still alive. Mourning a relationship that exists but not in the way you need it to. Some of you are still waiting for validation that's never going to come. Still trying to prove something to a man who might never be able to see it. And real change starts when you stop trying either version of your father, the one he was or the one you wish he'd been. When you accept that his story shaped yours but doesn't have to define it, when you understand that breaking generational patterns isn't about blame, it's about freedom. Freedom to write your own story, create your own definitions, and build your own path. You got to dig deep in those inherited beliefs, and you have to question everything. Why do you think showing emotion makes you weak? Why does asking for help feel like failure? And why does success look exactly like what he told you it should look like? Start separating your authentic beliefs from the ones you've absorbed by osmosis. This journey is going to trigger resistance in ways you didn't expect. Your family system doesn't like change. People get uncomfortable when you start breaking patterns, especially the ones who benefit from those patterns. You might hear shit like, "You've changed," or "You think you're better than us now." That resistance is actually a sign that you're on the right track. The deeper work happens in those small daily moments when you feel that familiar anger rising and choose to step away instead of explode. When you catch yourself about to dismiss your kids' feelings and choose to listen instead. When you want to hide behind work but choose to be present with your family. Each tiny choice is like voting for who you want to become. Some patterns will be harder to break than others. The ones tied to survival, to money, to safety, to worth, those have deep roots. You might find yourself slipping back into old behaviors under stress. And that's normal. It's okay. Change isn't linear. You're rewiring decades of programming. Expect some glitches in that system, and you'll start noticing ripple effects. As you heal your relationship with your father's ghost, other relationships start shifting too. You'll handle conflict differently, express love differently, parent differently too. You'll lead differently. Everything changes. Because when you're no longer reacting from old wounds, you can respond from current wisdom. Building something new means getting comfortable with uncertainty. And your father's patterns, as damaging as they might have been, were familiar. They were a map even if it led to places you didn't want to go. Creating new patterns means walking without a map for a while. It means trusting yourself to find a better way. And this isn't about becoming perfect. Breaking patterns doesn't mean never getting angry, never making mistakes, never struggling with the same old demons. It just means catching yourself sooner, recovering faster, and choosing differently more often. Small shifts that add up to massive changes over time. The most powerful moment comes when you can look at your father with clear eyes, seeing him not as a hero or villain of your story, but just another man who did what he could with what he had. When you can thank him for the strength he gave you while consciously putting down the burdens that were never yours to carry. You get to decide which parts of his legacy to keep. Take the resilience, but leave the emotional shutdown. Keep the work ethic, but drop the workaholism. Hold on to the protectiveness, but release the control. You're not erasing him from your story. You're editing the parts that don't serve the man that you're becoming. And your task isn't to be better than your father. It's to be better than you were yesterday, to heal from what he couldn't, to face what he avoided. You're not just breaking chains, you're forging new links, stronger ones designed to connect rather than constrain. This is where you start writing your own history, where you create your own definitions of strength, success, and manhood, where you build a legacy that future generations won't have to recover from. And this isn't just about freeing yourself from your father's patterns. It's about becoming the ancestor your descendants will be proud to have come from. I hope you boys enjoyed today's episode. I know it cuts deep for a lot of men. We don't actually have good relationships with our fathers, unfortunately. The world was designed very differently back then, and they had different expectations and responsibilities. And unfortunately, that wasn't good enough for some of us growing up, if you were lucky enough to have a father, which is becoming increasingly rare in the world today, which is very sad to say. And that's putting it mildly. I feel for all the young boys that have to grow up without a male figure present. It's a shame on our society that we allow that to continue. But as usual, let me know what you think in the comments below, if this resonated with you at all. And appreciate you guys for tuning in. Likewise, everybody that's in the private community, hopping on the calls every day of the week for conversations like this, and those that are doing the private consults. Thank you guys so much. Been a blessing speaking with you. See you on the next one. Take care, boys.